Why shouldn't Christian run away from anxiety? As I just think about that title, I want you to first of all think through these questions. So, what kind of relationship do you have with your anxiety? Think about that. Is your relationship with your anxiety such that do you feel embarrassed about anxiety? Do you feel anxious about anxiety? Do you feel fearful about anxiety? Or do you feel frustrated when you have to deal with anxiety? What's your relationship with your anxiety? And also think about this. What would happen if you continue to live with fear rather than doing things to work on it and help you overcome it? Or what would happen if you continue to ignore anxiety rather than working on it? So maybe as a Christian, if you just have it in your mind that anxiety is nothing to do with Christianity, so you try to ignore it, what's going to happen to you? Just think about that for a bit as we go into this workshop. Now, in this workshop, I would like to start with a story. So the tale of two Christian women, Janet and Clara. Now, these are two people I've worked with, but I've named them confidentially, so you don't know who they are. But I'll just call them Janet and Clara. So they went through the same situation. They both were in an abusive marriage where they were molested, beaten, and done quite a lot of things that I don't want to mention online here. And they both ended up being divorced because they left the husband because it was just too much. But then one, Janet, was able to make success with her life, move on, and just things just got better and things just improved. But the other, Clara, everything just went downhill. She struggled to cope. It just didn't work out. They were both Christians. They both had quite a similar experience in the marriage of being molested. And yet, one was able to learn to cope and be better, and the other just went downhill. The first discussion question I would like to have is, what do you think made the difference? Can people just give suggestions of what they think?
Different personality types.
Okay, different personality types. Thank you. Anybody else?
I think the way their outlook on life is. So
outlook on life.
What's your outlook on life?
Okay, the outlook on life. Yeah, personality types, outlook on life. Yeah. Any other takers?
One dealt with it and the other one didn't.
One dealt with it and the other one didn't. Okay. I heard somebody else was talking as well.
One got help, the other didn't.
One got help and the other didn't. Are we having anybody offline?
They're different coping mechanisms.
Different coping mechanisms. Yeah. So in my experience working with people, a lot of what you guys have said can definitely be influencing factors in helping someone cope. So for this two individuals, though, just kind of walk through how they actually managed to reach where they were. So some of the things you said will be relevant here. So Janet, the first thing what she did was to go to therapy. Whereas Clara, she isolated herself. As somebody else said, she didn't get help. She tried to deal with things by herself and just talk to herself. Janet, in therapy, they just allowed her to explore things. And I think somebody mentioned that as well. Explore things over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Whereas for Clara, whenever anything reminded her of what happened, the anxiety got so much that she just felt she had to just block everything away. And then Janet, when she felt the emotion, she worked on being compassionate with herself and not blaming herself for feeling anxious or struggling. And I know how sometimes after you've been through a traumatic experience, years later you'll be thinking, this is 2 years down the line. I shouldn't still be dealing with the issues of 2 years ago. I should have been able to move on. So Jenna was able to acknowledge, yes, I'm struggling. Let's just learn how to cope. Let's be kind to ourselves. Whereas Clara, whenever she felt those difficult emotions, she felt really frustrated with herself. She felt very angry. Actually, got angry with herself. Right. For Janet, she kind of allowed herself to go out and about, especially to those places where she felt extra threatened. Perhaps because those are the kind of places she used to go with her husband, or there were people who knew them as a couple in some areas. So anywhere where she felt she would meet the husband or meet people who knew her husband would have caused her to feel threatened, but she still worked on going to those places. Whereas for Clara, she just stayed home most of the time. She did all her shopping online, only went out when she needed to, or when she had someone who she could trust. And that's only when she went out. And for both individuals, as you said, they were Christians. So prayer was a consistent pattern in their experience, except for the fact that Janet was able to confide in some other friends, some of her other Christian friends who also prayed for her. So as you're looking at this, you can see a pattern, can't you? Can anybody see? Can you just say, if you can see a pattern, just say, yes, I can see a pattern. Nobody's saying anything, so maybe nobody can see a pattern.
Yes, I can see a pattern.
Okay.
One is accepting and acknowledging that this thing has happened and ready to move on, while the other one is blaming more than accepting.
Blaming herself, yeah, and more than accepting. Okay. Anybody else can see any patterns?
One lady is ignoring the problem rather than facing the problem, where the other lady is facing the problem and getting strategies to deal with it.
Ignoring the problem, facing the problem, strategies to deal with it. Very, very good. Thank you so much for that. So, bearing this picture in mind of these two individuals, both Christians, we'll just take that to go through the rest of the workshop now. So the first question I have after this is, what does it mean to run away from anxiety? You see, to run away from anxiety, if you start finding yourself, for whatever reason, consciously trying to avoid having the feeling of anxiety itself. I know earlier on, Abigail, you mentioned the COVID was causing you to have anxiety. So a lot of things cause us to have anxiety. I remember one day, I must have been roughly around 7 years old then, between 5 and 7. I can't remember my exact age, but I was back home in Nigeria, and just in front of our yard, the gate was open, and there was a cobra on the street. I saw that cobra, and I suddenly remembered a karate movie I'd watched recently of somebody using the snake style to fight cobras, right? And I was starting my cobra move, my snake style cobra move. I wanted to fight this cobra. And the cobra lifted his head up. My sister just yelled from the window. So if not for my sister yelling to ask me to stop, perhaps you won't see me here today. What's interesting with that one was that I did not have any anxiety. But was that safe?
Nope.
Obviously, it wasn't safe. So why am I kind of saying that story with this idea of running away from anxiety? Sometimes we feel that acknowledging that we are anxious people is a weakness. Whereas in my experience there, me actually not realizing there was a need to feel anxious was the weakness. So come back to this question. What does it mean to run away from anxiety? When we start to feel anxious about feeling anxious and trying to push our anxiety away and trying to detach ourselves from anxiety for whatever reason, maybe because we feel somehow that it's abnormal. And I don't know, for those people in this country, they may not have seen these kind of experiences before, but back home, when I was growing up, there's some people who we call youre. That just means mad people. And the people who we call youre, they would be roaming the streets, maybe half naked, tattered, dressed, hair tattered, and everybody had behind their mind the fear of ever becoming like them. But where in reality, now that I know what I know, in reality, what has happened to those people was that they struggled, they suffered emotionally, but because there was no system in place to actually help and make them be better, their situations just deteriorated to the point where they lost conscious awareness of who they were and how they were, right? But for a lot of people who do not know about what mental health really is, the fear of becoming something like that can be overwhelming. So to acknowledge that you're struggling with a mental health thing can feel like you're acknowledging that you're becoming like that. Okay. Can I just ask Abigail, could you just help me monitor the chat box? Just in case there's any questions or any comments that's relevant to what we're saying. And you can stop me if necessary.
Okay.
Okay. So, a few things will cause us to want to run away from anxiety. One, as we said, the fear that we're somehow going crazy. The fear of anxiety itself, because when you get that emotion of anxiety, the emotion of the physical feeling of anxiety can mimic so many negative illnesses and threats. So, for example, you get your heart racing and it feels like you're going to have a heart attack. You feel your head is going to burst. You're worrying that you're going to have a stroke. It can mimic a lot of feelings that make people scared of it. And so, one of the biggest traps when I'm working with people with anxiety is beginning to have a fear of anxiety itself. So the fear of fear, or feeling frustrated about anxiety, or feeling depressed about anxiety. Those three things, whenever I'm working with someone and I notice that those three things are present, I know that the work will be a lot harder to help the person break free. Okay, can I just stop and just ask, because I'm not seeing anybody's faces, and I'm not able to tell whether people are following, if this is sounding relevant, if this is making sense, or if I'm losing people. Can I just get some feedback? Is this all are you following this? Is it making sense?
Yes, it is actually making sense. Why I say that is because, as I pointed out, since COVID, I get quite anxious. If I hear we're going to receive amber patient, they're not COVID, because my word is not COVID, but the moment you tell me we're going to receive amber, which means they've been in contact with a COVID person, which means we have no idea if they caught the COVID from that patient or not, I usually start perspiring. I maybe don't show that anxiety to my staff, because obviously you have to be calm. But I know I perspire, my heart rate goes up, my anxiety level goes up, my awareness level goes up, put it that way. I want everything in place. So I don't know about others, but it does that to me.
Cool. So as what you've mentioned there, you can see the different things you're mentioning. So the awareness levels goes up. And why would our awareness level go up when we're feeling anxious? Can anybody else give a suggestion as to that?
It's a negative thought that you give yourself, that you're telling yourself there's danger ahead. and it brings some fear and makes you want to either run away or stand up to it or freeze. You got the fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say a similar thing, that it was same thing really, that the
I cannot
hormones-
hear, please. Can you speak up louder, please?
So our body will produce hormones that will be responsive to the fight or flight experience that we have.
Yes. There's something I want to touch on, which is what the sister who just spoke before said, something about it's a negative thing. And that's the thing that I wanted to kind of highlight. Being aware of threats itself is not negative. And it's often something we have to work with people to just start to acknowledge first. Because when you consider it as a negative thing, you start to consider that you are doing something that is negative because you're being aware of threats. Would it have been a negative thing if I was more aware of the cobra in front of my gate as a threat? Definitely not. Because it was a threat and I wasn't fully aware of the threat. So I wasn't feeling the anxiety symptoms. But when there's a real threat, it's only natural to be aware, be more aware, because the body, our brain is highlighting that this is a situation that you need to protect yourself and be more careful. So hoping that makes sense. Okay. Thank you so much for your comments. Okay. So we've talked about what causes people to want to run away from anxiety. So if you think about it this way, there are two things happening. There's the thing that's causing the anxiety, and there's the anxiety itself. Usually, our response to the anxiety, just like the snake. Let's say I saw the snake and I was anxious and I ran away. That would be my initial response. But then my response to my reaction, because of what the anxiety made me do, is also very, very crucial. And this is where the running away tends to happen around anxiety, when we don't want to face the fact that we were anxious about something. Okay, so what happens when we run away? So when we run away from anxiety, it has a tendency to increase the risk of developing an anxiety disorder. So an anxiety disorder, I mean, there are loads of different types of anxiety disorders. So you have things like generalized anxiety, which is just that tendency to worry about any and everything. When you find yourself not being able to just let go of the worries, and your mind's just constantly going about every single thing. And sometimes you're thinking you're worrying about things that don't really matter, or you find yourself even looking for something to worry about when there's nothing to worry about. So that's generalized anxiety. There's the OCD. We kind of hopefully we should all know OCD, because it's quite common, where people are always cleaning and compulsively doing different things. You go to their homes. Their home will look like a window, a show. What do they call it? A show place. Or people washing hands loads of times. That's also anxiety related. There's panic disorder, where the anxiety is now creating a cycle of panic attacks, and having regular panic attacks as a result of the anxiety. There's the social anxiety, where we struggle in social situations. And what most people may not know, that if I used to struggle very badly with social anxiety, and I don't know if I've said this already when I came to you the last time. So there are loads of different types of anxieties, but with all of them, if you start to try to block or ignore or not want to deal with the anxiety itself, this is us kind of running away. So what I was saying here, I've tried to explain what it looks like, what running away from anxiety looks like. So the idea is that you are not acknowledging your anxiety, you are not dealing with the anxiety, you are afraid of the anxiety, you're frustrated with yourself for feeling anxious, or you're anxious about feeling anxious, or you start to become sad about being anxious. So those traits tend to follow people when they are not trying, when they're trying to avoid the anxiety itself. So what does it look like to actually deal with anxiety in a healthy way? What does the healthy fight look like? This is when your thoughts and feelings, you have thoughts and feelings that are to handle the anxiety in a positive way, as opposed to having the anxiety controlling you, or as opposed to running away from it. So in other words, we acknowledge that the anxiety exists, and we actually have a system for working with the anxiety. And I will be coming to why this is so important in a bit. So first, we just want to kind of look at some Bible passages around anxiety. I want to do this because sometimes, again, the way the Bible sometimes talks around anxiety and the way we will interpret the verses might get confusing for someone who struggles. So I want to go to Philippians 4, 6, 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guide your heart and your minds in Christ Jesus. So this is almost like an admonition from the Bible. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, be prayerful in petition. What does it mean? Does it mean that if I'm anxious, I'm somehow not sort of following this guidance? Does it mean that somehow, because I'm anxious, there's something that I'm perhaps maybe not close enough to God? What are your thoughts? Don't give me your thoughts. Don't give me your thoughts. Yes, just give me your thoughts. I'll go to the next verse and then you can give me your thoughts there. I just want you to think about the thoughts now. This one now says, if you have true faith in God, should we experience fear? And sometimes some people will say this: the fear only comes when we do not trust God. And the Bible passage, Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So if you have anxiety, does it mean that you have less faith in God? Okay, but my sister was going to speak earlier on. Please, can you carry on? I think someone was speaking now.
Could you just repeat the question? Sorry.
So the question is, so we're saying, first of all, if you have anxiety, right, does it mean that you're somehow not close enough to God? Are you not following this admonition of not being anxious and bringing things to God in prayer? If you're anxious, does it mean that you don't have your faith in God is not real, is not true?
I think being a Christian is a continuous growth. It's a continuous experience. And I feel that God wants to bring us to a higher level. So we'll go to him as we are. And as we see that we may have fear or anxiety, God will give us his word that will sanctify us, that will change us so that we can overcome the things that are challenging to us. So I think being a Christian means that we will have certain challenges, but then God will give us the power to overcome those difficulties, those challenges that we face.
Thank you very much for that. Anybody else?
So could I ask a question then?
Yes, please.
In light of the question you asked. So are our emotions, do we choose them or do we choose our response to them? I think getting this thing right will answer your question. So do we choose our emotions or do we choose our response to them?
So I'm taking that you're throwing the question to the whole church here.
Yes.
Yes.
And including yourself. But I know you're going to make a final answer. In regards to answering that question, I think that is very important. Do we choose our emotions or do we choose our response to our emotions?
we can look at anger, for instance. We can get angry, but then we can choose not to behave in a way that is bad. So I feel that we can experience fear, we can experience anxiety, but the only way we can deal with anger is if we allow the change to happen, either through discipline in self and allowing God to change us, either through different methods. And I think the same thing would appear to fear and anxiety.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Anybody else?
It is our response to it.
I agree. We all have emotions. We all have the same emotions, but sometimes it's how we respond to those triggers of emotions that what makes us different, you know. And I think that's also how we handle fear, how we handle anxiety. Another person might lash out, one other person might internalize it and react differently. So the emotions are common to all of us, but the way we respond is completely different.
Okay, I will throw a bit of spanner into the works. Thank you so much for that. I will throw a bit of spanner into the works. Could it be possible that there's a degree of emotion where if you reach that stage, you actually lose control?
Yeah, and that's true. You actually lose control. But
again, and in that stage, when you've lost control, is the issue of choice still at play?
Yeah. Because the choice is still a choice to get to that stage where you lose control. So choice still plays a big role in it, because there's still a choice to let yourself reach that stage where there's no control.
Yes. So, and I think this is where it can get a bit confusing, because you see, when we talk about emotions, there are a few different aspects to emotions. So one aspect is the psychology aspect of emotion, but there's also the biological aspect of emotion. So when we talk about the biological aspect of emotion, so for example, let me look at the concept of food, eating food, for example. So if you are hungry, can you control the hunger?
Yes.
Yes.
You can't stop the hunger by saying, I'm trying to control my hunger. Can you?
No.
You might withstand the hunger, and eventually the hunger disappears. But the act of hunger, this is something that your body will do. You can't say in your mind, body, stop being hungry. And that will happen. Or let's use another example. We all have our hearts beating now, isn't it? Our hearts are beating inside us. I mean, we could do some sort of breathing technique to slow the rate of the heart down. Yeah. But can you, by choice, just decide to stop your heart?
Take some medication.
No, you can't by choice decide to stop your heart. Okay. Now, I'll tell you why I'm saying all these things, because you see, when it comes to emotion, it can be a bit confusing. There's some aspects to emotions that are way within our control, but the reality is that there are some aspects to emotions that are completely outside our control. Yes, if we are able to deal with things before they get to a certain level, we can have some control. But at a certain stage, when it comes to emotions, people start to lose control. I'll give you an example. So somebody becomes suicidal. And somebody who, if you don't know about what happens when somebody gets suicidal, you would think, oh, why are they doing that? How can somebody just decide to kill themselves? And then you find some experiences of people who, they've never been suicidal before, but suddenly they hit a rough patch in life, they get depressed, and they become suicidal. And they come out of the depression. I'm wondering, how did I allow myself to get that? Why did I allow myself to start thinking about suicide thoughts? I never believed it could be possible. Now, this is what tends to happen when people get depressed. You see, when you get depressed, at one stage, the depression is still more a mixture of the biological, your body, your biological makeup, and the psychology, your thoughts, your thinking system, where you're still in control of what's going on. But at a certain level, it starts to become, the deeper the depression gets, the more that your biology takes over. And at a level, it gets so deep. And this is the point where sometimes as therapists, we are told to watch out. And that person needs to be admitted to hospital, or they need to be on a 24-hour watch, because at that point in time, the biology of depression has taken such hold on the person, which means, and when that happens, what happens is that your thinking just becomes negative, regardless of your choice, regardless of your ability to control it. Your thinking is just negative because there's now a dysfunction of the biology of the body that's creating that problem. Okay. Does this make sense so far?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's one person that said yes. Does it make sense to more people? Can I just see that if people are following me there?
Yeah,
I can relate. It makes
relate.
sense.
Okay, right. So there's a similar thing that happens with anxiety. And so we have this kind of relationship in our brain with emotions. So there's in the brain, there's a cortex, which is the top of the head. The bit that's on top of the head, the bit that looks like cabbage on top of the brain. That's the cortex, which is used for logical and rationalized thinking. And often when we're trying to kind of take control of things and deal with things and manage things, that's the part of the brain that is often in control. Then there's a limbic system, which is the emotional part of the brain. And so there's this kind of relationship happening all the time with our emotional brain and our logical brain. So the more your emotional brain is in control, the more it pushes away your logical reasoning. So we'll give it an example. So you may have heard of instances where a mom runs into fire to go and save the baby that's inside the house that's burning. It's not a logical thing to do. But at that stage, the emotions has taken over and making the person throw logic out of the window and doing something completely irrational. So there's that kind of relationship where the more anxious we get, the more depressed we get, the more angry we get, the less rational we become. And the higher that emotion rise, the more irrational we become. And you've ever heard of this concept of the illness of manic depression? Yeah? When people get manic, the manic side of manic depression is where you get really happy. But in this case, the happiness is so much, the emotion of happiness is so much, the person becomes irrational. Right. So, what are we saying? There is a logical, rational part to emotions, but there's also a biological part to emotions. And if we are not aware of that system in play, the way we live our lifestyle could influence things in such a way that the biology of that emotion can have more of a control over us. And this is where mental health problems start to occur.
Sorry, Brother Wally, someone hand is up in chat.
Okay. So before I answer that question, what I just said there, did that kind of make sense?
Yes.
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 So one person said it, two people said yes.
Yes.
Everybody says yes. Cool. So, okay, the hands in the church, yes.
Oh, my question is, the slide you have on the screen, Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Now, what do you say to a person who suffers from anxiety, who suffers from fear, and their ideology is that God will look after them, God will heal them, and they find it, they use this text as a means of not finding help anywhere else?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I brought this text up, really. But before I answer your question, can I throw it to the audience? Let's see what people think generally.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
I do suffer from anxiety, and sometimes I'm so fearful but the verse, when you speak it to yourself, when you are going through that anxiety, and you just try to remind yourself, fear not, for I am with you. Fear not, it just helps you to calm down, and it takes some of the anxiety away because you have that the word of God. It doesn't stop us from getting anxious, but if I remind myself when I'm going through that phase, and you repeat those words in your head or aloud, if you speak them aloud, then it helps you to calm down. And sometimes you assess the situation and you just say, you know what, I can handle this.
Yes, thank you so much for that.
Can I add
something I just wanted to add to that? So really, in this situation, what you're doing is you're pulling God towards yourself as a source of comfort, and that can naturally help you feel calm. Thank you so much for that. So who was going to talk now?
Me?
Yes, please.
Right. I grew up in Nigeria with all these scriptural things. So coming to this country where everything is based on books and all that, I tend to be very fearful. Meanwhile, I've come to realize now that it has to do with knowledge. I have to be knowledge based. Yes, God is behind my help, but God wants me to be much more to be aware of principles, because there are spiritual principles and there are also earthly principles. So I used to be mostly, spiritual principles, but I've realized that, focus.
Yes, and this is one of the reasons why the last presentation we did at the church, we're talking about the importance of recognizing that there are emotional rules, just as much as there are spiritual rules, which are spiritual principles. There are also kind of emotional principles that God is expecting us to learn and understand. And if we remember, even Ellen G. White in her books, she talks about the importance of us mastering the mind and understanding the way it functions. So God expects us to have this knowledge as well, being able to kind of understand the way our mind functions. Thank you so much, my sister, for that. So I wanted to kind of...
Sorry, may I just add before you move on? I agree with Sister, I think that was Sister Jovia and Sister Praise that was talking before. When I'm anxious, I do exactly that. Use the verse to comfort myself. Because when I'm anxious, I feel like I'm in this thing on my own. But the verse says, fear not, I am with you. So you recognize at that point when you repeat it to yourself, you're not alone anymore. God is there. Your focus come off of you being alone, and it becomes a focus on God being there with you. And just the distraction of recognizing that you are not alone and your eyes now focus somewhere else, that takes away the anxiety. Well, some of it, most of it.
Yes. So really, there are two things going on there. There is the connection to God, obviously, and we believe that God has the power to do what is impossible. So he has the ability to quell and help you get to that calm place. But there's also the other thing going on here, and that is that having the comfort of someone else who makes me feel supported and loved and cared for, which is something I'm going to be touching on later. It actually addresses a very core need of a certain system in our body that controls whether we get anxious with life or not, which I'll be talking about a bit more later. I just wanted to kind of talk about an experiment that was done. I can't remember the name of the sheep. You may have heard of this experiment. So the idea with the experiment was that, so they had a lamb and a sheep. So the lamb was a mother for the sheep. Sorry, the sheep was the mother for the lamb, and what would happen is they were tying the sheep. I believe they were tying the sheep so that it cannot move, but allowing the lamb to go around the room. So they had hay all littered around the room for the lamb to eat. So the lamb will go around the room and be eating the hay. Then the researchers will send a shock and shock the lamb, electric shock, and shock the lamb, and the lamb will feel the pain but run to its mother. and then everything was fine again. And every time they did that, the lamb just ran back to the mother. Everything was fine again. Then they removed the mother out of the pen, out of the room, and they did the experiment again. So this time they shocked the lamb. The lamb started to shiver, 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 and it just fell down and died. So there was a lot of comfort and support in the fact that I have someone here with me who I can lean on, despite what's happening. Despite this scary thing or scary experience that I don't know why it's happening. It's happening. I have someone here I can lean on. And this is one of the things that is so powerful about being a Christian, because wherever we are, even if you leave your mom in Jamaica and come to England, your mom who loves you and supports you and come to England, God follows you to England and he's still there for you as a support, right? So we have that strong support there, which is very helpful. And I would even highlight a reason why it's super helpful in a bit. Okay.
There's someone whose hand is up
Right.
in church, Brother Wally.
Okay, let's go. Carry on. Can I just check, because I don't want people to start telling me to slow down, to rush up and finish up. How long are you happy for me to be here?
You go on, Brother Wally. We're interested in hearing the full length of this presentation because it is very helpful. There's
right.
someone hand up in church if you would like to unmute
Yes, please.
yourself.
Yes, go ahead.
My thoughts were, you mentioned that there was some biological side, and I just wondered if you could share a bit more about that, because we as Christians, we understand the spiritual side, and a sister mentioned that she claims Isaiah 41:10. I also have it up on my wall and I claim it, but I am curious to know a bit more about the biological side.
Okay, I did mention one part of it, which is the limbic and the cortex, the way they kind of work in tangent. And so what happens is the more emotionally you get, the less you're able to think rationally, which is often why sometimes it might feel like you have two minds. One mind knows that something you're thinking is totally irrational, it doesn't make sense, but another part of you just can't let go of it and makes you want to keep believing that threat that you know is not really a threat. Which is often what would happen. So, for example, with OCD, you feel you got to clean your hands. Logically, you know it doesn't make sense. Nothing will happen if you don't clean your hands that much, but your emotional side is taking over and is making it harder for the logical side to reason and rationalize things, right? So when we know that is happening, for example, we then know that, okay, there's something, we need to do something about that, because if we don't do something about that, that system will keep defeating us all the time. It's a bit like just walking in the dark and expecting to be able to find your way without no light, or maybe even being blinded, right? But when we have light and you can see the path, that you know what you're doing. So being able to understand the relationship with the logical mind and the emotional mind and know how to work with it, then gives you cues for recognizing when the emotional mind is taking over again, how to then work with it. I'll give a good example. So
all right, you out the hug zone, bro. I don't know what to do with my chest.
Sorry?
What to say? There. How's my heartbeat? I don't know what to do. You're out the hug zone. Sorry.
I just lost the plot there. What just happened there? Yeah.
One is just talking in the background. Sorry.
I can't share, obviously, all the stories.
Oh, was that some error, mistake?
Yeah, sorry about that. Continue, Brother Wally.
Okay. Can we just have people mute their mics just in case if they are not talking? Right. I've lost my train of thought now. What was I saying? Yeah. So when you know that this is happening, this is possible, and you learn to understand the signs that's telling you that your emotions are taking over, then you know that it's time to put in certain measures. Sometimes we teach them some measures. And sometimes the measure may be as simple as, okay, stop everything you're doing now, sit down. And instead of trying to think through the problem and trying to rationalize the problem, get a pen and paper and actually write what you're trying to address down, what you're trying to deal with down. Write it down on paper. Why are we writing it down? Because we see when we are writing things down on paper, it starts to engage the logical part of the brain. Just by writing something down on paper, which then naturally will just make your emotional mind calm down, and then you can actually think a lot clearer. Meaning then the decisions you're making is less emotionally influenced, more logical influence. So in most cases, we need a bit of a balance of both the emotions and the logical. So for example, if you remember me talking about the cobra I was trying to fight, I wasn't using any of my emotional mind at all. in the sense of emotion, because the emotional mind would tell me there's a threat here. You have to manage yourself. Be careful. So I'm hoping that kind of makes sense and explains that bit. There are loads more emotional aspects to the biological aspects to kind of understand and manage, right? But it's become complex to kind of bring it all in here. I do have a new book coming out, which goes in depth into these concepts in a way that is not complicated, it's not complex, it's just written in a way to help people really be able to break apart and understand these things for themselves. And maybe if you are interested, I could let you have the PDF of the book when it comes out. Okay, but I'll just move on. I hope I've answered your question though.
Yes, you have very well. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'd be interested in the book.
Yes.
Just a quick question.
Yes, please.
So in light of the story you gave with you and the cobra, right?
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So we're talking about the emotional versus the logic. You understand?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how would you account for Samson with the lion?
You've brought in the spiritual now.
Yeah.
You brought in the spiritual.
No, but he was a physically strong man. I don't think he was thinking about spiritual there. I think
and so he may not have been thinking about spiritual there.
Yeah.
But with Samson, his whole experience, there was a miracle going on with his whole life. Even the time when he was being disobedient, there were still issues with kind of miracles going on with his whole life. So I won't perhaps be able to sort of compare him with myself trying to find the cobra.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, what was the point you were trying to tease out there?
Because I'm just wondering. There are some individual is either fight or die, and this is not flight. You know, you're cornered. You're cornered. So it's either you fight or you die. And so some people, because they are cornered, they fight, and they will even kill a cobra. You understand?
Yeah, true.
So I was just looking in front of from your experience, because from a Christian point of view, we cannot disassociate all the spirituality from how we are dealing with this topic.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Yeah.
Because it's part of who we are.
Exactly.
Our spirituality is ingrained within us.
Exactly.
Once we become Christian, so we cannot fight physically without it have a spiritual connotation.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, with the fight or flight thing, definitely it's possible that even if you see a lion, you might want to fight a lion if you think you can get away. You might have the braveness to fight a lion, and maybe after the event, you start to shake like a fish.
Exactly.
But when the emotions take over, it throws rational away. Yeah. But I'm thinking the Samson and the lion's case. I'm actually thinking there was the power of God part of him, and maybe part of the miracle God did in his life was to make him strong enough to fight a lion. So I'm hoping that kind of makes sense there, right? But I think what you said there is important, because we cannot disconnect the three: the spiritual, the emotions, and the physical. We cannot disconnect the three. But for most people, they've lived their world in the spiritual and the physical, and disconnected the emotional. And I feel like for the reason why there's so much emotional health problems is because of that disconnect. The world does not treat emotional things as important, so we don't spend time training our children as they're growing up, or it's not a subject in schools. We don't take it so seriously, and yet it's the one part that tends to kind of mess up so many people's lives. Because you find if a couple is fighting, if people are fighting, a marriage couple is fighting, emotions are at the base of it. right? If you have problems with bullying, right? It's emotional. There's so many things. You can see emotions at the pace of it, and yet it is one thing that we don't take that much time to study and understand. Okay. Can I move on now?
Yes, you may.
Right. Thank you. Right. So I want to kind of come to this big question here. And the question is, did sin exist before Adam and Eve sinned? And the next question there is also next similar to it. Did fear exist before Adam and Eve sinned?
They said there was sin. The sin started when Lucifer wanted to excel and be where God was. So if we're saying that having the ambition of being God is a sin, then it had to start from before man existed, because wasn't Lucifer in heaven and then thrown onto the earth before? So
interestingly,
I don't know.
though, that question: did sin exist before Lucifer sinned?
Can I say yes?
Right. Why do you say yes?
I feel I'm looking at it in the light of that being like spiritual. I think sin represents Satan.
Oh, so did you say yes to that sin existed before Satan sinned? Did you say yes to that, or are you saying yes to sin exists before Adam sinned?
Sin represents Satan. So did sin exist before Adam and Eve sinned? Yes.
What about, did sin exist before Satan sinned?
No. That's my thought.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Do we have any pastors in our midst?
Come on, Pastor Fitz.
Can our pastors shed some light on us?
No, for me, this question here,
yes,
Brother Wally.
Yes.
When it comes to did sin before Lucifer, there's no proof within the Bible that sin exists, because the Bible tells that God created, a perfect world, perfect universe. And then again, the Bible go on to let you know, and also the inspired writing help us to understand that sin is like an intruder. There was no reason for it. You can't really explain it. To give an explanation is to give a reason for it. So it still remains a mystery. So to answer that question, biblically, absolutely no, it didn't exist before Lucifer.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is the strange thing, for something to now occur. So for something to occur, which means there must have been a possibility of it to occur. So for sin to come into place, there must have been a possibility of it to come into place. Why am I going with this? Because sometimes when we're thinking about things like anxiety and emotions, and sometimes as a Christian, we're always thinking like, oh, as a Christian, you should not have an anxiety. You should not have anxiety. But the reality is, as Christians, we still all sin. Yeah? I'm not comparing sin to anxiety and saying anxiety is equal sin, but I'm just saying the result of sin into this world was death and ill health. So the result of sin into this world was a dysfunctioning of everything that God has created. So if you go bald-headed, is that as a result of sin?
I swear you're going, Brother Wally. I swear you're going, but from our point of view, what has been revealed to us within our finiteness is that not because there was a choice, because there was a choice, that God didn't create his creatures as robots. It did not mean that God will sin to come into play.
No.
Because it was there, okay, it's going to happen. It still come down to choice where that was concerned. But when it comes to our anxiety here, when it comes to our fear, these are all the byproducts of sin. Is that something that we choose?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what we choose to do is respond to our anger, our fear, our anxieties, and so forth. When it comes to sin, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. So because of the existence of sin, so I think it's important to kind of highlight there's a difference between anxiety and anxiety that has now become again the just normal anxiety which there's a choice for, but an anxiety that has a biological nature for. It's important to kind of start separating that, because if we don't separate that, when somebody suffers with anxiety that you cannot make a choice and be driven by your choice, you start to feel like you are abnormal. Does that make sense? So the reason why I'm trying to kind of connect it with this idea of sin here is that when sin came into the world, many things just started to not work the way God intended it to work, including our emotions. So if you struggle with diabetes, for example, did God intend for you to get diabetes?
No, I don't think so, because when God made everything, he said it was good, as Pastor said. But I come back to the bit that says, when Lucifer was in heaven, this, if I recall, I might be not saying it verbatim, like it says, and sin entered the heart of Lucifer, isn't it? When that sin entered the heart of Lucifer, and then all these things start happening as a result of sin, like diabetes, for example. I have a choice. If I know that I have diabetes in my family, and then I go on and I eat lots of chocolate, lots of sweets, I have a choice. Do I stay away from these things, eat healthy things that's not going to then make me a diabetic person, and I could stay being pre-diabetes for the rest of my life, meaning not having it, no, but having an awareness that I could have it? Then back to what Brother Pastor said, it's a choice. Just like in heaven, Lucifer had that choice. Should he allow sin to enter his heart or not? The choice is there. It's the same thing with us now.
And can I add to that, please?
Yes, go on.
The Bible says, when you know the truth, it will set you free.
Yes.
I believe in this case, the truth is knowledge.
And this is where the point is here, because sometimes people don't have the knowledge. Because if you don't have the knowledge of how anxiety functions on a psychological and a biological level, how are you going to deal with it? How are you going to know what to do to have that choice? If you get my drift, Abigail. When you have sorry?
I think you make a very important point there, Brother Wally, because I think some let me try to be as diplomatic as possible.
Right.
There are some Christians who believe that if you have say for instance, you have a emotional, psychological problem, their way of dealing with it is that you pray because you're a Christian. But what you have established in the first workshop and what you're continuing now is that there are something you have to deal with based upon the law, how it applies to the various if I'm dealing with something emotional, there's a law that deal with emotional stuff. So as far as I'm concerned here, I think you make a very important point, because there are some Christian, and I just want to labor on this point, who believe because they are Christian, all they need is to pray. They don't need to get professional help. And I think you're trying to remind us that you need professional help. Maybe it could be psychotherapy, maybe it could be seeing a therapist, maybe it could see a counselor or whatever. But it's not whilst it's always good to pray, prayer does not fix everything.
That definitely. So you may not necessarily have to go for a professional help as per se, but you can start to study about it and get more knowledgeable about it as well, because there's so much information available. Obviously, if you have a counselor or professional help, you get to the understanding of it a lot faster, as it is with anything you want to learn. When you lean on somebody who already knows it, you get to your solutions faster. But it's important to start making it part and parcel of life, trying to understand, make it a study and not run away from it. Because sometimes we run away from it because we're too scared of what we might find if we were to sort of start to try to understand it.
We have a point, Brother Wally. It says here by Aunt Rose that you totally agree with Pastor Fitzroy. Emotional wounds need to be dealt with also just as much as a broken leg. Exactly.
So you come back to that concept of choice, and that's the bit that can be very heartbreaking, because I could be in front of a client who feels they are beating themselves up so badly that I want to stop doing what I'm doing. I want to stop being so anxious, because whenever I'm anxious, I get very irritable and easily annoyed at my family members, and I'm ruining my relationships. I want to stop it, but it's like I just can't stop it, right? And they're getting annoyed at themselves because they feel they have the choice to stop it, and yet they are not stopping it. Some other people may come to them and say to them they're not trying hard enough. But I kind of start to say to them, actually, it's not so much that you're not trying hard enough. You are trying really hard, but you're trying the wrong way. You are doing the wrong things with all your best effort. And no matter how much you work hard at it, if you are going in the wrong direction, you will only always keep going in the wrong direction. And so what we do then is to show them, okay, this is what you're trying to achieve. This is why you are going the wrong direction. This is what you need to do to come in the right direction, whilst you're trying to manage this emotion. And lo and behold, they start finding themselves being less irritable. And now their choice, they can actually make control of the situation by choice, because they now understand how to actually make the whole thing work. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Perfect sense.
Right. So kind of going back to those two ladies I started the workshop with. So we saw one lady who went into therapy, gathered all the support that she could gain, followed the rules, followed the system, and also just kind of got better. But the other lady, one, we could be saying, oh, she had the choice, but didn't take the choice. Didn't take the decision to actually start helping herself. But what we don't know, though, is what psychological blocks are there that's making it hard for her to make that choice. Is she thinking that as a Christian, I shouldn't subject myself to somebody else's mind? I should just be only subjected to Jesus Christ's mind? What principles is she holding on to that's actually making it hard for her to get the right help or get the right knowledge? So sometimes there's onions and onions, or layers and layers and layers of different things that's holding people back from being able to get to the right place they need for help. And so it's not as easy as the choice. I'm hoping this is making sense. So the choice is very important. It's important that we can get to that place where we can, by choice, do what we want to do. But if there's so many mountains of different things that's actually blocking you from being able to use your choice effectively, then there's no matter how much choice you have, it just won't work.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Please go on.
Right. Very, very important what you're saying there. So my question is, that same thing that you're dealing with there, with one person being able to get over it. What if this person who has been hurt, like you say, one woman, both of them got divorced, right? And one of them really can't get over it. What if someone in that same situation went to counselors, prayed to God, did everything, changed the eating habits, everything possible, because they just want to move past this thing? And you said something just now about them being so anxious because they just, why am I not getting over this thing? Why is the thing still bothering me? It's been 2, 3, 4 years. Mm-hmm. I'm trying everything, but it's just not working. You know, what if somebody is going through something like that? I mean, they don't know where they're going wrong, but every time they see something, it reminds them of it. Every time somebody says something or asks a question, reminds them that
of this bad relationship that they've had, the hurt that they've been going through, just can't get over it. How do they know what they're doing wrong? How can they?
I think this is why I think this is why it's important to then, like my brother said earlier on, to actually speak to the right professional. And I'm saying the right professional, because not every professional is the right professional. So, for example, if you're someone who is at that level that you're of what you're dealing with now, and you decide to go and see a counselor, now the counselor will give you some help, right? But most likely, with the skill set that the counselor has, they may not be able to help you resolve the things that you're trying to resolve there. So in this case, you might need a trauma-trained counselor or trauma-trained therapist. Because sometimes you might have a counselor who then has skills on dealing with trauma as well. And then they give you the certain skill sets that you need, or a psychotherapist or psychologist. So sometimes knowing the right person to go to, and even if you go to a psychologist too, sometimes they may not be the right person, because the person's character traits or personality traits clashes with yours, or the style the person uses clashes with yours. There's so many things that could get in the way. Unfortunately, what a lot of people do is they go to therapy, maybe it did not work for one reason or the other, and they conclude that therapy does not work. No, there's loads of layers that maybe have made that system not work at that time, but there may be other therapists that could actually do the work for you and get you where you're going. I mean, I've worked with so many people who maybe they've seen 10 or 20 therapists before me, but then when they come to see me, we're able to see through the problem and get them over that boundary. So, and I've worked with people who they didn't gel with me at all. I thought I was a horrible, I was a rubbish therapist, and I just hoped that I didn't discourage them from seeking help with somebody else. So it's important.
So would you say this problem is always fixable, right? Somebody's going through that. It's always
the specific problem that we just described. Yes, it's very fixable. It's very fixable.
Brother Wally, we have one statement, and we have a hands up. We have Sister Andros saying the counselor gives tools. A trauma therapist will be able to help the person unblock the challenge that's causing the blockage. So therefore, that's what Sister Andros is saying. And we do have a hands up in church as well.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
My question is following on from Elder Fitz. Now, when do we recognize that prayer is not enough?
Okay. Do you mind if we don't answer that question yet? Because it'll take us away a little bit from the train where we are, but we can come to that question. Abigail, please, can you help me note that question so that we can come back to answer it?
What's the question again, please?
Can you ask the question again, my brother?
My question is, I mean, Elder Fitzroy spoke just now about people resorting to prayer and not to get help. But my question is following on from that. When does some person who suffers from anxiety come to that point when they recognize that prayer is not enough?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Right. So based on everything we are saying here, what I'm really trying to drive home is that because you're a Christian who's suffering from anxiety, it doesn't mean that you are faithless. It does not mean that you're faithless. And the Bible actually supports this concept, because if you think about what happened with David, this is Psalms 56 by verse 3, says, "When I am afraid, I will trust in you." But what is David doing here? Is David not acknowledging that he gets afraid too?
Definitely. First step, I believe, acknowledging that something is wrong.
Right. So when I'm afraid, I will trust. I will trust in you. So he's acknowledging that there's something is wrong, that he's afraid. So as Christians, it's not unchristianly. It's not like it's being anxious. It's nothing to do with faithlessness. It's nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. Because the Bible talks about David being a man out of God's own heart, and yet here's David acknowledging that yes, he gets afraid as well. Okay, so yes, the Bible teaches that we are to have peace even when we don't understand the reason behind our circumstances. and this means that being able to look beyond our anxiety itself to discover what God can do in our lives. And so the more we learn to seek God's wisdom about the problem and see God's wisdom in the problem, the more we will discover his purpose for our anxiety. So this kind of helping us look at it from a Christian perspective, to start to actually see anxiety as something that we can also work with within our experience of being a Christian. Because even in our anxiety, God has a lesson he wants to help us understand. He has a growth that he's yearning for us to experience, even in our difficulty with anxiety. Right. I'm going to be moving on by thinking that, because I'm moving a bit slightly away from some of the Bible concepts we just talked about, I'm thinking it might be a good time to talk about that, to answer that question that my brother asked about prayer. Can you tell me what it was again, Abigail?
Okay, so the question is, when does a person recognize prayer is not enough?
And I think he was asking the pastor the question.
Pastor Fitzroy?
Nisha, what answer it?
No. You asked me to answer it. No, it's just like I said to him when the question was asked. If your leg is broken, you can't just pray to God and say, please fix my leg. Or if you want to read and you can't see the usual prints that you used to see all the time, it's time to go to the doctor. So simple as that. There's certain things that God has given us a brain to think. If you're falling on your hand is broken, you know to go to the doctor to put a cast on to heal it faster. So I think at that level, it's not that God cannot physically heal you. He can say you are healed immediately and fix a broken, but he has the way he works, we can see, and he has given us a brain. So I think along that line, if that's what on that level, I don't know if that's the line he wants to ask, or maybe emotionally he's asking. I'm not sure.
May I just add a text that goes with that as well? Because it says faith without action is dead. Faith without work is dead. So you can have faith and pray, but where's your work? Your work is to get up and go to the doctor if you've broken your leg. You've already prayed about it, and the prayer hasn't fixed it, because God has placed people there that can do the other part of fixing it. So prayer is good. Your faith is good to know that it's going to heal, but have enough faith to get up and go to the doctor to get it fixed as well. So we have a part to play.
Yeah. So it's important that we're not saying that God cannot fix that. God can miraculously fix the problem. God can take your eye problem away. God can mend that broken leg if he chooses to do so. We know he has the power to do that, but we also know that sometimes he doesn't do that. And I know somebody once told me that when Jesus Christ was washing was making one of those blind men to see, was telling me that the reason that when we see the rationale there, he could have said, see, open your eyes and see. He could have said it, but yet they just bent down on the ground, took sand, put spit together, rub it on his eyes. I don't know how that felt with somebody spitting on the sand and rubbing the sand and spit on my eyes. But that was what Jesus Christ did. And did he have to do that? No. So sometimes, just as Abigail has said, when God has provided the solution, he's not expecting you to still be waiting for him for the solution.
We from Aunt Rose, she said, God can also use people to help others, which is exactly what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. So, but to answer the brother's question, when do I know that prayer is enough? If you are suffering, and the suffering is not resolved, then, and there's help you can seek, go and seek help. I think it's perhaps not healthy to be waiting to figure out try and figure out the time when the prayer is not enough. If you're suffering and there's help there available, just seek the help. I think that's what's important. That's how we should think about it.
May I just add something? Yes, I agree with you, because the longer you stay and suffer is the longer it takes to correct the problem. It's, for example, I say to patients, if you're having pain, don't wait until the pain reaches threshold and to ask me for some painkillers, because then it makes it very difficult to bring that down. If when you start feeling a niggling sensation, I give you that paracetamol. By the time the pain reaches the threshold, which is the highest it could get to, that paracetamol would have started working and the pain wouldn't be as severe as it would be. And I think it's same thing with our emotional state of mind. If you see that you're in this dumped for like maybe 2-3 days and you're not getting out of it, it's time for you to get up and go seek help, because the longer you stay in the dump is the further in that abyss you're going to find yourself going down, and it's going to be difficult to get out of it. Sister Aunt Rose is online with an a statement or a question as well.
Okay, just before she goes, I think what you said there is so important, and I'll tell you why it's so important. So if I compare a client who gets into a trauma and come to therapy immediately after trauma to clients who get into a trauma and maybe years down the line they come into for therapy, what tends to happen is the clients who came immediately after the trauma, about a month or two after they've sought help, they recover. Whereas the clients who's waited years, they may be also waiting years before the issue gets resolved. And one of the reasons is because things compound on top of the problem that's there. Because you don't really understand what's happening to you, but you can feel yourself having so many different symptoms. You start to learn different habits on top of habits that are actually unhealthy. And before you get to the therapist now have to unpack all these unhealthy habits and help you now learn new habits to help you cope better. So the work would have been done a lot better and faster if you came immediately as the problem was being felt. Sister Russ.
Right. Also, sometimes we block our hearts because we've been wounded, and you block off, you put a barrier between you and others because you think, I've been hurt before, I'm not going back down that road. So you put up a barrier, but you lock yourself in, and nobody can get in, and you can't get out. So you've imprisoned yourself in a situation where you're locked in and you can't move, and that hurts you more.
Right. So thank you so much for that. I would definitely agree with you very much on that, but with a caveat. And the caveat is this. Quite often when I'm working with people, they feel that that's what they've done to themselves. I've locked myself in this. I'm the one who's caused this problem for myself because I have blocked myself from the problem, just like you have described. But it's not the person themselves that's sort of doing it to themselves. It's the circumstances they found themselves in and the best way they knew to cope with the situation.
I agree.
That's caused them to block and get blocked in that situation. It's not like they set out to block themselves. And this is important because I'm having to often convince people that it's not their fault that they are not coping. It's not their fault that they are not that they're blocking, right? It's the system that they've learned to cope. Because who was there to tell them that you shouldn't do that? Nobody.
It's the pain. That's
the pain, exactly. So the circumstances they were in, and the best way they knew to deal with it, because they knew that if they didn't block, they felt that they were just going to lose their mind. So they used blocking. Maybe they blocked by getting busy and doing different things to cope with it. But unfortunately, that same strategy eventually becomes what holds the problem alive, just like you said, my sister. Okay, thank you so much. So going back to this question I wanted to ask is, can being too dangerous lead to problems sometimes? So can being too courageous lead to problems sometimes? You guys have heard my story about trying to fight with a cobra. Back home in Nigeria, we had this very strange news that happened with a Christian from a celestial church. He went to the zoo saying that he wanted to show the world the God's power, that the God that held the mouth of the lions when Daniel was thrown in the den is going to hold the mouth of the lions in the zoo, and when he gets into the yard of the lion. So he climbed the fence and went into the yard of the lion, and guess what happened? I'm sure you can all guess. Obviously, the lion tore him apart, and he died. And I know it's a sad story, but what's the moral of that story?
There's a difference between faith and presumption.
There's a difference between faith and presumption. So God still expects you to walk within what is normal, what is expected. Yes, God can protect you from that. God could have protected me from that snake then, because I wasn't. I was perhaps tricked by the TV that I was watching then. But there is a stage where God wants you to know that actually, if you see a lion, you should be scared. If you see a lion, you should be scared and move the other way and go the other way, escape, find a route. Don't put yourself in a lion's cage. Okay, I saw a chat came up there, Abigail.
Yes, that was Antwerol saying he was foolish because he was being presumptuous. And I agree, because I was about to say it when Pastor Fitzroy said, the thing is, we have to remember we're living in a sinful world. We are not perfect. Most of us don't pray the way and have the connection that Daniel had with God in the first place. And then don't forget that was supposed to be a testimony. This man is being presumptuous. He wants to show the world that maybe he was something, maybe his intentions weren't the right intentions, because, for example, I've seen children falling into cages with wild animals and the children are kept alive because they fell in there by accident. The Lord, but if you presumptuously put yourself somewhere, well, I don't know if you're testing the Lord, but who dare you to test the Lord? Like he said to Job, how dare you, ask me these questions? Who built the earth and the sky and everything? So when you're being presumptuous, the Lord knows. And when you're innocently going into something and you're not aware, the Lord's aware of that because he knows our heart.
Sister Ross.
Remember also the devil tried to tempt Jesus that way, saying, if you are the Son of God, you can make bread out of stones, or throw yourself down from this high place you're at, and so on. So it's a temptation that the devil is giving to make you think that, oh yeah, I'm strong in God and I can do this because that is what I'm supposed to do. But isn't it selfish in a way to take that attitude?
Well, I think unfortunately the reality, we don't really know what was going on in this person's mind. We don't know what was going on in his mind. So it might have been very selfish. He may have been trying to prove to the whole world that his own connection to God he's showing that he's a great person when it comes to God. We don't know. But that principle stands, that you can't be presumptuous in this. But something I'm trying to kind of pull out of here, and there's also kind of linked to this concept of balance. So usually when I'm working with people and they're trying to break through their anxiety problems, they would have had an experience of trying some of the strategies that I'm suggesting to them. And they feel, oh, that strategy didn't work for me the last time I did it. It failed. It didn't work for me. So why are you asking me to do it again? Then I have to explain to them that when they try to do this strategy, for example, let's say there was someone who was being anxious, so anxious that he cannot come out of the house and walk across the street. So he says to me, I've tried to do this before, but it's not working. The problem is that you're actually trying to be too courageous at a go. And so you are trying to take a big heap and fly before you can walk. So sometimes I get them to do a very small thing. This is a very strange thing. So this person is feeling anxious. All they want to do is be able to walk outside that door and go to the shop by themselves. But every time they open the door, they can't do it. So I said to them, okay, rather than trying to open the door, let's start very simple by just opening the curtain a little bit. Now, that may sound like it's something that will not work at all. It might sound like, well, that's ludicrous. No. But what you are trying to do is you are gradually trying to help the person retrain the brain by gradually increasing the threat level, and getting the brain used to it. And before long, this person that's been trying to get out of the house for 30 years gets out of the house within a month, because we did it in this kind of process. So what am I trying to highlight here? Even when you are dealing with things like anxiety, we need to be balanced in the way we are trying to approach it. If you struggle with anxiety, there's a need for balance. You can take it too far as you're trying to kind of manage it. I'm hoping that makes sense. And I know, I'm not sure if the two stories quite match with the points I was trying to make there. Okay.
Yeah, I want to make a point, and
Yes,
that is
please.
why we should or must not judge anyone, because even though there is parts of the mind that operates very well and they seem very well able, there are parts that doesn't work very well, and we don't know these parts. So in light of that, sometimes we've just got to wink, because we all have ailments, and the individual who we may see as having an obvious issue may not know.
May not know. No, may not know.
Yeah. So
and that's so important. Yeah, that's so important, my sister, because it may seem extremely obvious to you, but the person who's actually living in that life, as we all know, it happens to all of us. Other people see us better than we see ourselves in many situations. Isn't that true? I didn't hear anybody agree with me, so maybe
that is true, because I have an appraisal at the moment, and I was taken to the matrons and the HR's office to discuss it, and she was saying to me, no, I said to her, I actually really don't know why you chose me for this post, because I thought you just put me in a number of people who apply to come for an interview, so that you look like you had a lot of people coming for the interview. And they both went, no, Abigail, we saw that we were convinced you could do this job, because you were so excited about it and you had so many ideas. And in my mind, I went for the interview just for the experience. I thought, I'm not going to likely get this job. But there you go.
It's always the case that someone always sees something in you that you do not see in yourself.
Yes.
And it's someone who knows you, can see it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Right.
Just to add to it, I can relate, because I'm undergoing a similar experience. So I really thank God that I'm in this group, because I'm getting healed.
Amen. We thank God.
Amen.
Right. So this is where I'm trying to kind of pull us to now. Everything I've said up to now, this is kind of where we are going to. So is there a need to differentiate between healthy anxiety and unhealthy anxiety?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yes, there is.
I heard a lot of people say yes. Do you mind giving me your reasons for saying yes?
When there's a good reason to be anxious, for example, you seeing a cobra, that's a good reason to be anxious and to run away. Whereas if there is, for example, if you're going for a job, for example, you don't know if you're going to get the job or not, you keep your mind open. Don't be anxious about it. Just keep your mind open. You get it, thank God. You don't get it, there must be something else the Lord has in store for you. That sort of anxiety you can manage. But the one where you personally know you shouldn't be going there, no, stay away.
Actually, I will agree and disagree with you, Abigail. Somebody wants to say something else. I will come back to why I disagree and agree with you.
I was going to say that short-term anxiety is for your flight and it's good for you, but prolonged anxiety then results in negative diseases for your body.
That's a very good one. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yes. Okay. For me, my understanding of healthy anxiety and unhealthy anxiety is that, from what I'm getting to understand now, is that to be anxious is okay. is even it shows from scriptures where you should be anxious for nothing. So Bible acknowledges that there is anxiety, and that one can deem it as being healthy. Where it is an unhealthy anxiety, where I've been suffering, was to think that there is no solution. Apart from involving God in prayers, but then your mind gets blocked by thinking, if God doesn't help me or whatever, there is no solution. But based on this meeting, and relating it to the Word of God, where it says the truth shall set you free, it makes me to know that in order to address anxiety is to acknowledge it, and then pen down what is it that is making you anxious, and also find solution. There is a solution.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Healthy anxiety is actually a built-in mechanism that we have. So
amen, my sister.
We can as the lady said, fight, flight, automation that comes on when we're in trouble. If there's a fire or something like that, it becomes unhealthy when we worry and we carry it on where it's not necessary. But we may lose control of that. And when it becomes a traumatic experience, then it's unhealthy, because we need to clear ourselves of that, and perhaps the person doesn't know. So that's when it becomes unhealthy. And the lady mentioned when it becomes long-term as well.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay, Brother Wally, just to let you know, the person who is in charge of the online bit is saying we have about 5 minutes.
Oh, right. So I have to end up.
Well, what will happen is we'll have you back again. We will love to have you back again. So
okay, because I have 25 slides altogether. We're on slide 15. So we have quite a long way to go.
Have you back again, and we apologize. We're aware that we started late, so we will have you back again if you don't mind.
Okay, so let's rush through this for the 5 minutes. So quickly looking at the purpose of anxiety. I'm just going to explain why I agreed and disagreed with you, Abigail. So just as we have said already, so the purpose of anxiety is to prepare us for danger and prepare us for life. But there's this system that occurs to everybody. It happens in everybody's body. We all have this safety soothing cycle going on with us. So we have the threat system, the drive system, and the safety system. So when the threat system is in charge, we feel anxious, we feel threatened. And usually what that does is that it causes us to be driven into action. So let's say I'm thinking I lost my job and I've been living on my salary, on my savings, and my savings is almost finished now. Now the threat system will kick in, and it will drive me to look for the job. I now get driven. Now I have more motivation to go through interviews, do applications, and that's a drive system pushing me into action. Now what the problem where unhealthy anxiety resides is when we live only in the drive and threat system most of our time. So if we spend 90% of our lives within those two systems, and we never are in that safety soothing system, it's highly likely that our anxiety, the experience of our anxiety, will be unhealthy, and will actually be affecting our bodies in different ways, in a negative ways, just like the long-term anxiety things my sister said over there earlier on. Now, the safety soothing system, this is where anything that makes us feel soothed, we spend a lot of time in that zone. Then it actually creates a balance of the three. However, if we only live in the safety soothing system, we don't go to the threat or the drive system, we actually still remain unhealthy, because it means then that we are perhaps very we feel very we don't do anything with our lives. We are just there. We're not engaged in anything to make ourselves progress and move forward and get things done, right? All three are important, and learning to sort of put all three in place is so crucial to being able to have healthy anxiety. Did that make sense? And I just tried to rush it through there.
It does make sense.
Okay, right. So I believe our time is up, so we should perhaps be wrapping up now. So maybe let's just do a quick summary. So everything we've talked about so far, what we want to highlight. Actually, I should ask the question, right? What's the characteristic of a Christian who's running away from anxiety? What would you say?
Blaming themselves, frustrated with themselves, blocking themselves from progressing. That's the one.
Definitely. And often they may even still be praying, and they may be leaning on God a lot, but they're not facing or dealing with their anxiety for whatever the reason is. Right. And so from what we have highlighted throughout this workshop, what would be a healthy way for that same Christian to start dealing with anxiety?
Anyone?
For me, it shows that there's a knowledge deficit.
Knowledge deficit. It's important to kind of get the knowledge for your own particular situation, definitely.
I think you said acknowledge, explore things, be compassionate with yourself, and acknowledge if you're struggling and get help, basically.
Cool. And so since you said that, I'll just rush to this bit. So these are common strategies that we will use with anxiety. So first of all, when we've acknowledged the fact that I get anxious and it's normal, right? And we also acknowledge the fact that if I do not manage my anxiety well, it can get so bad that the biology starts to take over, which then makes it hard for me to be more in control of the anxiety. Yeah. So the strategies we use, we explore, we challenge, maybe kind of challenge the thoughts that anxiety is giving us. Avoidance can be healthy sometimes, but if you do it all the time, can be problematic. So you have to know when it's okay to avoid and when it's not okay to avoid. We learn problem solving skills. We do a lot of experiments to kind of test some ideas we had. So before, maybe if you thought that, oh, if I walked across to say hello to that lady, she's going to slap me in the face or get upset with me or ignore me. Let's experiment. Just smile at her and then walk away. Maybe she smiled back then. You just experimented a little bit and made a connection. Sometimes we postpone things if it's necessary. So if you are worrying about a bill you've got to pay, but that bill is supposed to be in December, you're supposed to pay it in December, you can say, okay, maybe I can postpone it for then. We ignore sometimes. Yes, we can leave it in God's hand. And I know I've put it last there, not to suggest that that's the last thing we do, but I just put it there because sometimes we just ignore all of this and just try to just say we just leave it in God's hand. Whereas God has put a lot of different strategies available that we can implement to manage our anxiety. So rather than running away from anxiety, we first of all, actually, there's something else I should quickly say. I know I'm rushing through this. Please. I hope it's okay. So anxiety can actually help us be more focused. Because that's the drive. It's driving you and actually focusing you. And when Abigail said earlier on that she becomes a little bit more aware because of the anxiety, so it helps us to be more focused. These are some benefits of anxiety. Anxiety can help you get along better with people because anxiety makes you look at your behavior and think, okay, can my behavior be bad and be judged in a negative way? So you try to behave better. So sometimes that can actually help relationships to be better. Somebody who has no anxiety at all about how they're behaving can be so rude and difficult to work with. It can make you a better problem solver, which we've already said. It can actually help you make good decisions if it's not too much. When it gets too much, then your rationality is out of the way. But when it's there a little bit, it can stop you from trying to fight with the cobras in your life, like I did. Right? It can help you learn to trust your instincts. You can actually learn to start seeing, okay, when I feel anxious by this, there's a reason there. There's a good reason. Let me understand what that reason is. And maybe that reason then gives you a way to make a better decision. So again, it's all in moderation. So anxiety can make us feel uncomfortable, which means we will try harder to get out of certain situations, which is the drive system, which kind of highlighted earlier on. And anxiety can help keep us alive, right? Okay. So I'm really sorry I've rushed through all of that. But I'm hoping really that the workshop today has really been meaningful and helpful to a lot of the people who are here today. And I'm praying also that as you are dealing with anxiety on a day-to-day basis, first of all, you recognize that as a Christian, it's not sinful. It's not a faithless thing to have anxiety. But what's important is for you to now start to take your anxiety as something you have to study. Become a life student of anxiety, because the more you understand the way it works, the more you know how to work with anxiety in a way that it releases you, and you start to use it more as a tool for making your life more beautiful than dealing with it like an enemy that is crushing you in your life. Thank you so much for having me.